Year 100 BCE, under the Roman sun, a child named Gaius Julius Caesar first drew breath. He came from an ancient yet fading noble line, the Julians, who claimed descent from the goddess Venus herself. His family was proud, but not rich, and in the alleys of Rome, power belonged not to ancestry, but to ambition. As a boy, Caesar watched the city torn apart by rival generals, by civil war and blood. He learned early that Rome was not kind to the weak. When he was just 16, his father died, and the boy became the man of the house. Already, whispers spread. This youth was different, with fire in his eyes, and words that cut sharper than swords. Soon his courage would be tested. Rome's dictator, Sulla, demanded Caesar renounce his wife, for she was tied to Sulla's enemies. Caesar refused. He would not bow, not even to the most powerful man in the Republic. For this defiance, soldiers hunted him through forests and villages. His hair grew long, his clothes ragged, yet he would not bend. Bribes and cunning saved his life. And when Sulla finally spared him, the dictator muttered, "There are many Mariuses in Caesar, but only one Caesar is enough to destroy the Republic." From then, destiny followed him like a shadow. In war, he showed brilliance. In speech, he won hearts. In politics, he charmed both the people and the Senate. Step by step, through storms and betrayal, Julius Caesar rose, not as a mere man, but as a force Rome had never seen before. The Republic trembled, and the world held its breath, for the rise of Caesar had begun.
Years passed, and Caesar's ambition burned brighter than ever. By 58 BCE, he had become governor of Gaul, a land vast and untamed, stretching from the Alps to the wild seas of the north. To Rome, Gaul was a frontier of barbarians. To Caesar, it was destiny's proving ground. For 8 long years, Caesar waged war in Gaul. He was not merely a general, he was a storm. With unmatched strategy, he crushed tribe after tribe, forging alliances when wise, striking with ire when needed. His legions loved him as no other, for he marched beside them, shared their hunger, and rewarded their bravery with gold and glory. At Alesia, the greatest test awaited. Vercingetorix, the proud Gallic chieftain, united the tribes against Rome. Tens of thousands surrounded Caesar's army. Yet Caesar did not despair. He built walls within walls, trenches within trenches, a fortress around his army and another around the enemy. Trapped between Caesar's genius and Roman steel, the Gauls broke. When Vercingetorix surrendered, laying down his sword at Caesar's feet, Rome knew. A conqueror greater than any since Alexander now walked among them. In Gaul, Caesar had not only won land, he had won an empire of loyalty, wealth, and fame. And with every victory, the Senate in Rome grew more fearful, for Caesar's shadow stretched far beyond the Alps.
The year was 49 BCE. Caesar stood upon the banks of a narrow river in northern Italy, the Rubicon. Behind him lay Gaul, where he had won undying glory. Ahead lay Rome, the city that had raised him, now trembling at his power. The Senate, fearful of his ambition, ordered him to disband his army and return as a private man. To obey meant humiliation, perhaps death. To cross the Rubicon with his legions meant war, a war that would decide the fate of the Republic itself. The night was heavy with silence. His officers waited, their faces lit by torchlight. Some whispered of loyalty, others of fear. Caesar himself stood still, gazing at the dark waters. At last, he spoke words that would echo through eternity. Alia iacta est. The die is cast. He stepped forward. The hooves of his horse splashed into the Rubicon. His legions followed, their shields gleaming beneath the moonlight. In that moment, Rome itself changed forever. For Caesar had defied the Senate, defied tradition, and defied the very republic. He was no longer merely a conqueror of Gaul, he was a conqueror of Rome. The civil war had begun.
Rome had never seen a man like Julius Caesar. By 46 BCE, he had crushed his enemies in civil war. Pompey lay dead, the Senate subdued, and Caesar returned to the city as its master. Yet he did not call himself king, for Romans despised monarchy. Instead, he was named Dictator Perpetuo, dictator for life. In this role, Caesar reshaped Rome itself. He pardoned old enemies, reformed the laws, forgave debts, and filled the city with monuments of marble and triumph. He dreamed not just of ruling Rome, but of building a greater empire, stretching beyond the seas to Parthia and even India. The people adored him. They showered him with cheers, hailed him as father of the nation, placed wreaths upon his head. But in the Senate, shadows deepened. Many whispered, Caesar had grown too powerful. Was he not becoming a king in all but name? His face appeared on coins, statues honored him like a god, and once at a public festival, he even wore the crown of laurel too proudly. Rome was divided, half in awe, half in fear. Caesar, ever bold, walked the streets without bodyguards, believing no Roman would dare strike him. But in the hearts of his rivals, daggers of jealousy sharpened. The Republic trembled on the edge of fate, for power such as Caesar's could not last without blood. It was the 15th day of March, the year 44 BCE, the Ides of March. The morning sun rose over Rome, casting long shadows across the Forum. Julius Caesar, master of the Republic, prepared to enter the Senate. His wife, Calpurnia, begged him not to go. She had dreamt of his statue bleeding, of Rome mourning its ruler. But Caesar, ever proud, laughed at omens. Cowards die many times before their deaths, he said. The valiant never taste of death but once. That day, the theater of Pompeii became a stage for tragedy. Senators gathered, their faces calm, but beneath their togas, daggers gleamed. Among them were men Caesar had trusted, men he had pardoned, Cassius, Casca, and most painfully, Brutus, whom Caesar loved as a son. As Caesar entered, the senators encircled him. At first, words of petition filled the air. Then, steel flashed. Casca struck first, slashing at Caesar's shoulder. Shock filled the chamber. One by one, the daggers fell upon him. 23 wounds, each a betrayal deeper than the last. Caesar fought until he saw Brutus. His strength faltered. His voice broke with sorrow more than pain. Et tu, Brute? Then fall, Caesar. He collapsed at the base of Pompey's statue, his blood staining the stone of his rival. Rome's greatest man lay dead. The Senate, drenched in silence, had slain its savior or its tyrant. The Republic cheered at first, believing freedom restored, but soon chaos reigned. Civil war erupted once more, and from the ashes of Caesar's death, a new power would rise. His heir Octavian, the man who would become Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Thus ended the life of Caesar, and thus began the Roman Empire. The Ides of March had silenced Caesar's voice, but it had not silenced his legacy. In the bloody streets of Rome, the question remained: who would inherit his mantle? Caesar had left behind a name, a fortune, and an heir. Not a son, but a young great-nephew, barely 19 years old, Gaius Octavius. Few knew his face, and many dismissed him as a boy unworthy of power. But Octavian carried a weapon mightier than steel, the name of Caesar. Adopted in Caesar's will, he became Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. To Rome, he was the son of the fallen dictator. The city plunged into chaos. Caesar's allies, led by Mark Antony, sought vengeance. His assassins, Brutus and Cassius, fled, raising armies in the east. The Republic split once again, and civil war returned with greater fury. At Philippi, the armies of Caesar's heirs clashed with the forces of the assassins. Brutus and Cassius fell upon their swords, their dream of restoring the Republic dying with them. Yet victory brought no peace. Octavian and Antony turned upon each other, each hungering for Rome's crown. At last, destiny was decided at sea. In 31 BCE, at Actium, Octavian's fleet, guided by the brilliant Agrippa, crushed Antony and Cleopatra of Egypt. The lovers fled, their empire crumbled, and with their deaths, Octavian stood alone. In 27 BCE, the Senate, weary of bloodshed, gave him a new title, Augustus, the revered one. He refused the name of king, but in truth, he was more than a king. He became the first emperor of Rome. Under Augustus, Rome found peace at last. The legions guarded its frontiers, marble monuments rose across the city, and the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, began, lasting for centuries. Thus ended the age of the Republic. Thus began the age of empire, and all of it sprang from the blade that struck Caesar and the boy who carried his name.
The Republic was no more, yet Rome had not fallen. From the ashes of civil war rose Augustus, the first emperor, steadying the empire with unmatched wisdom. By 27 BCE, he had been granted the title Augustus, revered and untouchable. Rome breathed once more, and the people named this era the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. Under Augustus, the city flourished. Marble temples and triumphal arches rose across the forum. Roads stretched like arteries through the empire, linking distant provinces to the heart of Rome. Legions, once instruments of war, now patrolled borders to protect citizens, not conquer them. Augustus reformed taxation, established a fire brigade, and strengthened the grain supply, ensuring no Roman would starve in the city. He held festivals, games, and public works that dazzled the masses. Yet behind the celebrations, his governance was precise, strategic, and absolute. Yet power always whispers in shadows. Senators whispered behind closed doors. They remembered Caesar, feared the concentration of authority, yet dared not defy Augustus openly. For he had mastered the art of appearing humble while holding the reins of empire. And so, for decades, Rome knew peace, prosperity, and the awe of a single guiding hand, Augustus, the architect of an empire that would endure for centuries. When Augustus breathed his last in 14 CE, the empire he had forged passed to Tiberius, a man of discipline, intellect, and unshakable caution. Unlike the golden charisma of Augustus, Tiberius was dark, reserved, and secretive. The citizens hailed him, yet sensed a shadow over the throne. Tiberius ruled with cold efficiency. The empire's borders remained secure, trade flourished, and Rome's coffers were full. Yet inside the palace, intrigue festered. Tiberius distrusted the Senate, distrusted the people, and even distrusted those closest to him. The Praetorian Guard became his shield and his spies his eyes. He spent long periods away from Rome, retreating to the island of Capri, leaving ministers and advisors to manage the city in his absence. Whispers of cruelty, treachery, and secret trials echoed through the streets. Citizens feared accusations, senators feared betrayal, and Rome began to understand that the empire, while strong, could cast a long, chilling shadow over even its most loyal subjects. And so, under Tiberius, Rome remained mighty and orderly, yet the city's light dimmed. The age of golden festivals and joyous triumphs gave way to careful obedience, suspicion, and the knowledge that in the empire, power could both protect and destroy. In 37 CE, the empire awoke to the reign of Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known to history as Caligula.
The people cheered, for he was the grandson of Agrippina and beloved by the army. Yet beneath the cheers lurked a storm. Caligula began his reign with generosity, distributing wealth and hosting grand games. But soon, whispers of madness spread. He demanded to be worshipped as a god, insulted senators, and committed acts of cruelty, so bizarre that Rome itself shivered. Statues of himself adorned temples, senators were humiliated, and his whims became law. Even the Praetorian Guard dared not oppose him. The empire teetered under his extravagance and terror, until one fateful day in 41 CE, the guards struck. Caligula was assassinated in a flurry of blades, his screams echoing through the palace corridors. The people rejoiced at his fall, but Rome's stability trembled once again. From this chaos rose Claudius, an unlikely emperor. Shunned as weak and physically awkward, Claudius proved cunning, methodical, and surprisingly capable. He expanded the empire, conquering Britain, reforming bureaucracy, and stabilizing the administration. Rome, shaken by Caligula's terror, now found guidance in Claudius's quiet intelligence, proving that even the most unlikely rulers could shape history.
In 54 CE, Nero Claudius Caesar ascended the throne, a young man of charm, artistry, and ambition. At first, advisors guided him, and Rome breathed with cautious hope. But soon, Nero's passions eclipsed prudence. He fancied himself a poet, a musician, and even a god, while the Senate grew restless and the people whispered unease. Then came 64 CE, the great fusher of Rome. Flames devoured the city, reducing temples, houses, and markets to ash. The sky glowed red, the Tiber reflected fiery chaos, and citizens ran through smoke-choked streets, their screams echoing in the night. Nero, it was said, watched the destruction from his golden palace, singing as Rome burned. In the aftermath, Nero blamed the Christians, accusing them of treason, and cruel persecutions began. Yet he continued lavish construction projects, building his Domus Aurea, the Golden House, atop the ruins of Rome. Senators whispered rebellion. Governors plotted against him. The empire trembled under decadence and fear. In 68 CE, the empire erupted in revolt. Faced with betrayal on all sides, Nero fled Rome. Alone, abandoned, and despised, he raised his dagger and ended his life. The last of the Julio-Claudian line was gone, leaving Rome fractured, terrified, and ready for another rise or another fall.
The year 69 CE plunged Rome into chaos, an empire without a ruler, torn by civil war, known ever after as the Year of the Four Emperors. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, each rose and fell, leaving the city in ruin and the people in fear. Amid this turmoil emerged a general from the provinces, Titus Flavius Vespasianus, known simply as Vespasian. Vespasian was a man of discipline, pragmatism, and unmatched strategic skill. While others sought glory in Rome itself, he commanded the legions in Judea, crushing rebellion and securing imperial power by military might. In 69 CE, he was declared emperor by his troops and finally ascended to Rome's throne, bringing stability after decades of disorder. Vespasian restored confidence in the Senate, reformed finances, and repaired the shattered city. Most famously, he commissioned the Colosseum, a monumental arena to entertain the people and celebrate the might of Rome. Under his rule, the empire regained its strength, the streets of Rome buzzed with life, and the legions stood loyal once more. Through pragmatism and vision, Vespasian proved that Rome could rise from chaos. The Flavian dynasty, founded in blood and order, would guide the empire into a new age of power and spectacle.
In the summer of 79 CE, life in Pompeii was vibrant. Merchants hawked olives and wine. Children played in the sun, and citizens adorned their homes with frescoes and statues. The city, nestled at the foot of Mount Vesuvius, seemed eternal, timeless, and secure. But beneath the mountain, the earth stirred.
On August 24th, the sky darkened with a strange cloud. An ominous rumble echoed through the city. People felt tremors, and smoke began to pour from the peak. At first, curiosity overcame fear, but soon, terror struck. Vesuvius erupted with unimaginable fury. Ash and pumice rained from the sky. Rivers of molten rock surged down the slopes. The air became thick, suffocating, filled with dust and fire. Citizens ran through streets, trying to escape, but the city itself seemed to swallow them. Houses collapsed, statues toppled, and screams filled the air. In hours, Pompeii and nearby Herculaneum were buried beneath meters of ash. Lives frozen in final moments. Families huddled, merchants trapped by collapsing shops, dogs chained to their homes, all preserved for eternity. Rome mourned in shock, but life continued elsewhere. Yet the catastrophe remained a reminder. Even the greatest empire could be humbled by nature's fury. The eruption of Vesuvius would echo through history, preserving a city and its people as a time capsule for generations to come.
Rome, vast and magnificent, faced challenges that tested not its walls, but its soul. In 1601 CE, Marcus Aurelius ascended as emperor, a ruler unlike any before him. Known as the philosopher emperor, he carried both the mantle of power and the weight of wisdom. Marcus ruled during a time of constant threat. Germanic tribes pressed the northern borders, plague ravaged cities, and the empire's wealth strained under the demands of war. Yet Marcus met adversity with the calm of a stoic. He wrote meditations, reflections on duty, virtue, and mortality, reminding himself and future generations that true power lies in self-discipline, justice, and reason. In battle, he was steadfast, leading legions personally along the Danube frontier, sharing their hardships and earning their loyalty. In Rome, he administered justice with fairness, sought counsel from philosophers, and encouraged learning and civic virtue. Under Marcus Aurelius, the empire endured not through extravagance or terror, but through steadfast principle. Even as death loomed in the form of plague and enemy invasion, he remained a symbol of reason, restraint, and the enduring strength of Rome. His reign proved that leadership was more than power. It was a reflection of character, thought, and humanity.
The empire that had stood for centuries began to tremble in 235 CE. With the assassination of Emperor Alexander Severus, Rome plunged into what history would call the crisis of the 3rd century. For nearly 50 years, the empire was gripped by chaos, uncertainty, and relentless turmoil. In this era, emperors rose and fell almost monthly. Soldiers proclaimed their generals as rulers, plots, assassinations, and civil wars became routine. The Senate, once powerful, was powerless to stop the tide. Provinces rebelled, and rival claimants battled each other for the purple robe. Meanwhile, external enemies sensed weakness. Germanic tribes pressed on the Rhine and Danube. Goths and Franks invaded from the north. Persians threatened the eastern provinces, and piracy plagued the Mediterranean. Rome, once the unchallenged mistress of the world, now seemed vulnerable. Economy faltered under the weight of constant warfare. Inflation soared, coins were devalued, famine and plague followed. The empire teetered on collapse, yet somehow it endured. Soldiers, citizens, and provincial governors fought to hold Rome together even as the world around them burned with instability. The crisis of the 3rd century was a storm without mercy, a test of the empire's resilience. And in this darkness, the stage was being set for a man who would restore order, reform governance, and rebuild Rome's shattered authority, Diocletian.
In 284 CE, the Roman Empire, battered by decades of civil war, economic collapse, and foreign invasions, found a savior in Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletian. A man of unmatched discipline, vision, and authority, Diocletian knew that Rome could no longer be ruled by a single emperor as it once had been. He implemented the Tetrarchy, a system of 4 rulers dividing the empire into eastern and western halves, each with a senior emperor, Augustus, and a junior emperor, Caesar. This unprecedented innovation brought stability and allowed Rome to respond swiftly to threats on multiple fronts. Diocletian also reformed administration and finance, standardizing taxation, strengthening borders, and reorganizing provinces. Cities and roads were rebuilt, the legions reinforced, military discipline returned. He even sought to revive the cult of the emperor, emphasizing divine authority to ensure loyalty. Yet, Diocletian's rule was not without harshness. Persecutions of Christians, though politically motivated, marked a dark chapter. Still, his reforms were transformative. By the time he voluntarily retired in 305 CE, the empire was stable, disciplined, and prepared for a new era of power. Through genius, ruthlessness, and innovation, Diocletian proved that even the most fractured empire could be restored, and that Rome's survival depended on vision as much as steel.
In 306 CE, amidst the shifting tides of the Tetrarchy, a new figure emerged to shape Rome's destiny: Constantine, a man both cunning and visionary. He inherited an empire still fractured by civil war. Yet, he possessed a singular goal: to unify Rome and secure his legacy. Constantine was a brilliant strategist, winning battles through courage, innovation, and foresight. At the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 CE, legend tells, he saw a vision of a cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." He embraced Christianity, a faith once persecuted, and used it to inspire unity and purpose. Rome's streets witnessed a transformation. Churches rose where temples once stood, and a new moral framework began to guide the empire. Constantine founded a new capital, Constantinople, at Byzantium, a city destined to endure for 1,000 years, bridging Europe and Asia. Under his rule, laws were reformed, administration strengthened, and Rome's borders secured. Christianity, once a persecuted faith, became a cornerstone of imperial identity. By the time of his death in 337 CE, Constantine had changed Rome forever. No longer just an empire of swords and marble, it had become an empire of faith and vision. His legacy was more than victory. It was the transformation of an ancient civilization into a spiritual as well as temporal power.
By the late 4th century, the Roman Empire, once a bastion of strength and civilization, faced pressures it could no longer withstand. The western provinces were plagued by political instability, economic strain, and relentless invasions. In 376 CE, waves of Gothic tribes crossed the Danube, fleeing the Huns, and entered Roman lands. At first, Rome attempted to integrate them as foederata, allies and settlers, but corruption, mismanagement, and famine led to conflict. The Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE saw the Gothic forces crush the Roman army, killing Emperor Valens. This defeat marked the beginning of the empire's accelerated decline. Over the next century, successive barbarian invasions, Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, and Ostrogoths, ravaged provinces, sacking cities, and eroding the authority of emperors. Rome itself was sacked in 410 CE by Alaric and again in 455 CE by the Vandals. The Senate, once the seat of power, could only watch. Finally, in 476 CE, Romulus Augustulus, the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, was deposed by Odoacer, a Germanic chieftain. No armies rose to defend him. The empire had disintegrated from within. Yet Rome's legacy endured. Its law, architecture, language, and culture would echo for millennia, forming the foundation of Europe and the Western world. The fall of the Western Empire was not a sudden collapse, but a slow unraveling, a reminder that even the greatest civilizations are mortal, yet their spirit can transcend time.
The die is cast. Romans, I bring you a new era of prosperity. Et tu, Brute? Caesar!
Here then, the tale of young Gaius Julius Caesar, a boy whose destiny would shape Rome itself.
Alea Iacta est bev. The die is cast. Romans, I bring you a new era of prosperity. Et tu, Brute? Caesar! Augustus!
Citizens of Rome, behold the dawn of a new era.
We sail for Britain. The city is burning, but the music plays on. We must escape this inferno.
We stand on the brink of a new age, a new empire.